Right up Meridian, baby.
Welcome back to the second episode of Right Up Meridian. Scott here with you. Thanks so much for joining. A couple notes before we get going with Zion today. First off, we're going to do our best to keep this going once a week throughout the season. As we head the dog days of summer, might be a little bit every 2.5 weeks or so. Not a ton to talk about as we get out into free agency, but definitely once they release schedules, we'll start picking it back up. So just a little note about that. As always, Right Up Meridian is part of the Back Home Network, and Back Home Network is sponsored by Home Field Apparel. If you have not checked it out, just got the email today. It's like they knew I was putting out a pod and needed something to talk about. Coming out with a new Chattanooga collection. It looks awesome. There is a Ringer tee, the Ride the Rails to Victory. I will be rocking that. That's a great t-shirt for those of us who are Indiana fans or in the Indiana area. Not a lot of overlap with Chattanooga, so it's not like, getting an Illinois shirt, or I see some of their new, they have a great UCLA collection coming out, but with UCLA coming to the Big Ten, it's like, I'm not sure. Chattanooga is just dynamite, some great looking train shirts, so check those out. As always, use the promo code HOME for 15% off your first purchase. That's Home Field Apparel. Promo code HOME. Also want to throw out there that as we build out this podcast, we are looking to add some listener feedback section. So if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas for segments, or you just want to get something out there on the pod, feel free to email us at rightupmeridian@gmail.com. Just 3 straight words, rightupmeridian@gmail.com. Email up any questions you have. If you have a take that you want to get out there, save it on audio, send us a file, and we will play it on the next pod. And Tony, myself, or one of our guests, we will react to it. Definitely in these dog days, we love to take questions. If you have hypotheticals on trades or just famous Pacers players or any kind of things you want to talk about, just shoot us up an email or send us an audio file at rightupmeridian@gmail.com. And now super excited to have Zion Brown on the podcast. And with no further ado, here's Zion. All right, first time on the pod. Well, it's only the second pod, so everyone's kind of first time. But Zion Brown, Zion, man, how are you doing?
Oh, I am doing great. It's been an interesting couple of weeks with the Pacers, and I'm excited to just go in and talk about it.
I love it. You're ready to rock and roll. So what is your history with the Pacers? Like you've been around Indiana, like you're a little younger than I, so you maybe don't remember like the early 90s Pacers, but what's your like overall like history with the blue and gold?
Yeah, like you said, I'm from Indiana, from Indianapolis. So I really started watching basketball. Like the first full season I think I watched basketball was the year Frank Vogel took over for Jim O'Brien, which would have been 2011. Okay. And they were a losing team. It was Paul George's rookie year, and Vogel comes in and Paul George kind of starts to play more, and they sneak into the playoffs. I think they got swept or lost in 5 to D Rose that year. But that was when I started watching. So from there, I've just been like keeping up with the Pacers in the NBA and really keeping track of the team.
Yeah. So what they just had their draft. We'll kind of do a draft recap, talk about free agency. What's your view on the draft? This is one of the highest draft picks they've ever had. How do you think they attacked the draft, and do you like what they did with their draft picks?
I'll start with Jarris Walker. I do like that pick. I saw him play early for Houston last year, and I was like, there's a lot to like about him. He has to develop on the offensive end for sure, but I look at Jarris Walker and I'm like, this guy is a really smart basketball player, defense and offense. He knows where to be. He has a good feel for who to pass the ball to. And then on defense, he just blows up other teams' plays and other teams' schemes. And so I'm a big fan of that Jarris pick, that he's a guy that I think can play the 4 or the 5 for the Pacers, which they need. Hopefully he can rebound. We'll see, because the Lord knows the Pacers need some rebounding. That has been a struggle this last year or so. But I'm a real big fan of Jarris Walker as a player. And I just want to see how it works and how much he'll play as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing they've put themselves in is they're kind of in a similar like Kawhi Leonard spot where it's like you also got to hope that Koulibaly sucks.
Oh, for
it's
sure.
going to look really bad if like Koulibaly ends up being like, the next Giannis or something. Then it's like, damn, like we had him, even though there was like no world where they were going to pick him.
Right,
but
that's
it still
the thing.
sucks. Yeah,
I don't think they were going to get Koulibaly, and I don't even think anybody
they never worked him out.
I could be wrong. I don't think anybody else was going to try to jump the Wizards that one spot for Coulibaly. Yep. So I could be wrong. Maybe there was some team in the teens that was like, we love this guy. But yeah, that definitely could come back. If he is, turns into an all-star, all-NBA level player, that picture with him on draft night with the Pacers hat on is going to be, a nightmare for Pacers fans. But overall, I think they made the right choice.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, at this point, it's like, I think Taylor Hendricks had a little bit more buzz, it seems like, and some of the draft people liked him more, but it's like you're not getting Wembanyama. It's like at this point in that 6 to 8 range, I think you're kind of going with, who you like. Thank God they didn't take the Jet Howard like Orlando did. But, I think it's good. And like I mentioned in the last pod, you saw Tyrese Haliburton was involved in basically every single workout the Pacers did. And obviously they gave him the big contract, as they should have. We'll talk about that in a sec. And, Tyrese has a big hand in this organization. It's like, I would hope that if he's there and he's involved, like Tyrese probably saw something with Walker. He's like, I like that kid. And, this is the point where it's like, you've got to build the team around Tyrese. And so I hope that was brought into it too. And if Tyrese saw something he liked with Walker more than Hendricks, and to me, it's like, that's a tiebreaker. Let's go with that. And let's kind of trust that Tyrese is picking the right guys.
Yeah. And like I said, to me, it's about getting smart basketball players in. Obviously, I feel like that started with the trade to get Tyrese Haliburton. Sabonis is also a very smart player, but they just wanted to get younger and get another smart guy in for Sabonis. That started with him. Then I'd say the Andrew Nembhard, that was seen as kind of a reach. That first pick of the second round last year, you saw right away he belonged on the NBA court, in part because of just knowing the game. And now that continues, I think, with Jarris Walker. I think the vision of this team is we want smart players on our team. And now even they've got a good mix of really smart players and some incredible athletes.
The only thing that I will say, you're from Indy, so like the Indy Star, obviously, I like Greg Doyle. I get what he's trying to do. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but it's like his last couple articles about the Pacers and the draft, like draft night, he's like, hey, they should like trade 7 for Zion Williamson. Who you have issues with. You think he's saying your name wrong, which I get. And even now, like he had like kind of his, post free agent recap, and he's like, the Pacers did, something, but they didn't do a big thing. And it's like, I hear what he's saying, because it does feel like the Pacers are always kind of moving on the fringes. Where I do think it's a bit of a scarecrow argument is, it's like, I just don't think the Pacers, there was never a trade where they could get Zion Williamson. Like the idea of like, do we want Zion or not? It's like, that's not possible. It'd be like, well, could we have traded up and gotten Victor? It's like, that doesn't exist. Like there's no reality where there's really any of these big deals. Like we're not going to go get Dave. And so I think the Pacers are in this tough spot where I think they're making a lot of smart moves, but I'm not appreciative isn't the right word, but I think it's a little bit unfair for people to be like, man, they didn't do anything big. It's like, I don't think anything big was available. Like, last year when they traded Malcolm Brogdon for what seemed like just a couple different parts, it's like Brogdon had been out there on the market for a while. It's like kind of what the trade value is, kind of what this trade value is. Like if they ever trade Miles Turner, it's like they've had 3 years putting him on the market. I don't think it's trade Miles Turner, by the way, but it's like when they get it, it's like, it's not like they kind of know the market for it. So anyway, I think all of that is a little bit unfair to the Pacers at this point.
Yeah, I'd say the only big move that might have been out there to make is maybe looking into OG Anunoby. I'm not sure I'm not sure if he has 1 or 2 years left on his deal, but I know the Raptors are going through this weird phase where they're not really sure if they want to completely blow it up or if they are still going to try to compete. And so maybe he would have been out there, but other than that, I'm with you. I don't think the Pacers
OG was like 1 or 2 first-round picks. Like that's a high price for OG.
Yeah. And yeah, I do think Zion Williamson was on the market, but I don't really think the Pacers had enough for him unless you're giving up Tyrese Haliburton, which why would you do that? So yeah, I don't really think there was a big star move for them to make.
I think if you want OG,
whatever,
I think the Pacers are better off, going to Doc Brown, building a time machine, going back to that draft and picking him instead of TJ Leaf. Like I feel like that's the better move than trying to trade for him. Before we move off the draft, the Pacers take Ben Shepherd from Belmont, 26, 3-point shooter. Any other thoughts at the end of the rest of their draft? Like there's some thoughts like do you package all of those second round picks and maybe try and move up and grab Cam Whitmore as he's falling? Do you try and move up and get like Grady Dick instead of Ben Shepherd if you're going for shooting? Like any other thoughts on the first round? And again, all of these are kind of like, I don't want to spend too much time because half the guys after the 20th pick end up never playing in the NBA anyway. So it's kind of, we spend a ton of time talking about it. And then like 3 years later, it's like, who is that guy?
Yeah, and I was surprised to see Kevin Pritchard kind of explicitly said that they tried to trade up somewhere to get Cam Whitmore. He talked about that, and he just said, I'm not sure what teams were asking for, but he just said he wasn't going to give whatever they were asking for to get those picks, or it was just that all those teams that passed on Cam Whitmore really liked whoever they took ahead of him. And so he said he tried to do that, and they couldn't get it done. So other than that, there was nobody in that range that I was just so in love with that I think you needed to trade up for. I didn't know too much about Ben Shepherd, but like you said, he's a shooter. His shooting has gotten better every year in college. And like I said, I'm not sure if he'll play this year or what type of factor he will be, but it's an interesting prospect to draft late in that first round.
So we go into free agency and you're looking at like Kyle Kuzma, and there's a lot of guys like that. And then, this is, again, I'm just shitting all over the media here. But I listened to like a lot of the Ringer stuff, and it's like they spent all the free agency talking about like Bill Simmons as a whole, like 20 minutes, and how Bruce Brown is like the best guy out there. He's going to be awesome, and he's going to be fantastic. And of course, in his mind, he's like, maybe the Celtics can get him. And then it's like the Pacers get Bruce Brown, and then it's like 2 minutes in the Pacers, like, oh yeah, they got Bruce Brown paid too much. Hey, moving on. It's like, I thought this guy was the best guy. Like I thought he was going to be really good. Here's my question to you. It's not a great history. When you talk about the Pacers and free agency, everyone kind of defaults to David West as the number one free agent. Is there a world where we just saw the second best free agent signing the Pacers ever made? Or wildly, could this be the best free agent signing the Pacers have ever made?
Yeah, I'm going to have a hard time saying that I know
Bruce David Brown, West took you to some Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, it's better than David West because David West was a really versatile, talented two-way player. And I mean, Bruce Brown is too, but I'm not sure if he's got as much, especially scoring polish as West had. But Bruce Brown is a guy that, man, he's been a part of winning teams the last few years. You look going back to Brooklyn and those KD and Kyrie led teams. And then now, of course, he just won the championship with the Denver Nuggets. So he's been a part of winning teams. He knows what it's like to win, which right now in the Pacers, you don't really have those guys. Miles Turner, before the Bruce Brown signing, Miles Turner was probably the winningest player on the Pacers. And I don't think Miles Turner has even won a playoff series. He's been to the playoffs a few times, but I think every time in his career that the Pacers have made it, they lost in the first round. So now you get a guy in Bruce Brown that has won series and now won a championship, and that's going to help these young guys, I feel like, while also being an actual just good player. I think that goes a long way. So I like the signing. You get the team option. So if it's just terrible this year, you don't have to bring them back. You have to pay somebody. You have to hit a minimum now with the salary cap, and you had to pay somebody. He's now the highest paid player on the team until Haliburton's extension kicks in a year from now. I don't really see much wrong with this signing, unless you think it could stunt the growth of Benedict Mathurin or anything, which I don't think it will.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, to your point, the second year is a team option. I feel like they had to spend the money. Like they overpaid him. I do think there is a tax just to come to Indiana. There's kind of a free agent tax. He probably was going to get $15 million a year. There's a tax to come to Indiana. I think there's also a tax. I think that second year, we probably could have gotten him 2 for $40 if the second year was a player option, but the second year is a team option. So it's that probably raises, obviously I don't know, but in my mind that raises the price, but it gives the Pacers some of that flexibility. They still have a really nice contract window. I like it. And I was trying to pull up the other contracts here, but you look at other guys who have won, like Fred VanVleet has that, winning pedigree. He got 3 for 105 or something. Dylan Brooks is getting, another 80, 90. I mean, in the grand scheme of things for this type of player, I think you got the best quality guy who has that winning pedigree for really, I don't want to say a reduced price, but again, compared to VanVleet, I think Bruce Brown could be a better asset for the Pacers because VanVleet and Buddy Hield kind of mix a lot of the same things they do, and you got him for pretty much the same price, and you only got him for 1 year.
Exactly, and the Rockets is a whole different thing because they're not only trying to get better like the Pacers are, they're trying to grow up. Whereas I don't think the Pacers have an issue with maturity levels on the team. They're just working on getting better and getting more better game for the NBA. So that's a little bit of a difference why Houston maybe want a guy like Van Vliet or Dylan Brooks. And so, yeah, like you said, though, I definitely feel like Bruce Brown would be considered a better asset than especially Van Vliet, maybe not Brooks, but I think especially the Van Vliet deal. And so, yeah, I don't think there's much to dislike about this. Like I said, I feel like Bruce Brown is a guy you can play at 3 or 4 different positions, and he can help you win games, which we've seen him do for about 3 years now.
Second best free agent signing Pacers ever had?
I think I could be willing to go there. I mean, obviously,
what would be the second best? Like David West is always the first. It seems to be kind of the default first. I don't even know the second best. Like we got Shrimp through a trade, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, I always think of the Monte Ellis, debacle, how that failed. I don't want to say Al Jefferson, his signing wasn't a failure, but it wasn't like special. So, like, yeah, it could be.
Monte Ellis was a wild ride. He's one of those last like high school to the pros guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, he put up some wow. Yeah. All right. The other thing that I think is interesting is by getting all right. They also got Obi Toppin for basically nothing. It's funny because the Pacers continually get second round draft picks. And I'm always like, what are you going to do with these? Like, there's nothing to do with second round draft picks. They turned 2 second round draft picks into Obi Toppin, which leads this team in a very interesting spot. First off, they have like half of the 2020 lottery now. So you have, in 2020, Obi Toppin went 8th, Tyrese Haliburton went 12th, Aaron Nesmith went 14th, and where's Jalen? Jalen Smith went 10th. So you basically have 8, 10, 12, and 14. Like every other pick, the Pacers have pretty much the back half of the lottery. And then if you look at Miles Turner was a lottery pick at 11. Buddy Hield was a lottery pick at 6. Benedict Mathurin was a lottery pick at 6. Jarris Walker is a lottery pick, obviously, at 8. And then I mentioned everybody else. That's 7, 3, 6, 8 guys on our team who were lottery picks. So over half of the team were lottery picks. Now, lottery picks can suck. It's not like just because you're a lottery pick, you're good. But, that's a lot of high-end draft talent from a lot of drafts that aren't that long ago. For me, it's like I look at the Obi Toppin thing, and it's like that's, you're getting a guy who was behind Julius Randle. Like, I'm not sure he ever got to show what he could do. I think that's a great pickup for 2 second-round picks.
Yeah, I like this deal. Second round picks are, for some reason, I need somebody much smarter than me to explain it, but they are becoming more valuable than ever. A lot of teams like the Pacers are trying to stock up on those second round picks to end up making a deal later down the line. And that's what the Pacers were able to do to get Obi Toppin. He is a freak athlete. So him in transition with Tyrese Haliburton, we saw how well Tyrese Haliburton was in transition this year, and him getting to play off of Haliburton in transition is going to be fun. He can space the floor a little bit, not a great shooter, a bit inconsistent, but he can do some of that. And he'll have more of an opportunity. He only played 15 minutes a game last year. I expect that to be at least 20 this season with the Pacers, unless he just isn't playing well at all. But I expect that to really jump up a bit for him, and the opportunities will increase for Obi Toppin. And it's going to be a contract year now. He doesn't have an extension. So he'll be looking to prove himself as a quality NBA player. Not that he'd be out the league or anything. He'll be in the league regardless of what happens this year. But he wants to prove that he's a quality player that belongs on a team and that belongs to get a pretty big extension.
Yeah. The Haliburton thing to me is kind of a no-brainer. I'm not sure there's much to talk about. But, I mean, do you have any thought? I mean, besides just like that's what you do and that's what you have to get? So,
yeah, no big thoughts. I thought it was funny. I did get to go to a few summer league practices this last week, and Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nimhart, all those guys were like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna need a roll." They were like, I texted them and said, "I like Rolexes, dinner's on you going forward." But yeah, no big thoughts. Obviously, you have to pay him that. There's no really question about it, and it's well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with Haliburton. I have season tickets, as many people know. Like, I go to a lot of the games. You and I will go to some games this year, man. We'll do some potting live from the game. It's a good time. He's so much fun to watch. Paul George, I would sit there and watch him and be like, this might be the best athlete we've ever had on the Pacers. And I still stand by that, like the best two-way athlete at a high level. But like there were times where Paul George wasn't a ton of fun to watch, just like James Harden is like, I'm not huge on that brand of basketball. He's good and he's great at what he does, but it's kind of a lot of ISO and you work here and there. Like Haliburton brings everybody in. And you'll have these moments where it's like, oh shit, there's a no-look pass. And like just all these little shovel passes. And he brought a lot out of Miles Turner this year. He's just so much fun to watch. He looks like a fun dude to play basketball with. And, you know, clip it now. I'm sure in like 6 years when Haliburton's, you know, requesting a trade to the Heat, I'll take this back. But there's something about Haliburton that feels like this might be one of those stars that is going to be happy staying here. You know, you always knew Paul George was from LA. I don't know what happened with the Oladipo part. Like that he got injured and then it went all the hell real quick. And, you know, the history of this league is that guys just want to leave. And Lillard's like there for a while. He's like, all right, man, I'm out. And, you know, he had a run there, but there's something about Haliburton. Like I was reading stories where he left Sacramento and was like sad. Like he wanted to be in Sacramento and that was a small market. And so I think there is a world where the Pacers, you know, have a real shot to have a masthead, have another Reggie Miller type who's a star, who's here for a while. Oddly, their bodies are similar in like length and skinniness between Haliburton and Miller. But I don't know. It's a contract you have to do, but I feel positive going into it being like, I could see him playing this out, the contract, and not in, you know, year 4 or 5 being like, all right, man, I'm out. I want to go to Miami.
Right. I mean, like you said, you never know. So, but right now it doesn't feel that way with him. And you were talking about his game and just how exciting he was. I remember I didn't really watch him at Iowa State for whatever reason. I didn't catch any of their games, or maybe I did, and I just had no clue who Tyrese Haliburton was. But I remember his rookie year with the Kings. I, you know, stumbled across some Kings games, and I was like, who is it? Like, this guy is really good. We get to year 2, he improves a little bit and on the Kings still. And then I was just shocked when I saw that the Pacers were able to get him. I was like, oh my goodness, like this guy is really good. And I don't think people realize it yet because he's playing with another really good point guard. And so now you get to see that show every night with the Pacers, and it is a joy to watch because you could tell he has so much joy and so much fulfillment when others get involved. And those are the type of players I love because he's so happy to see other players make shots or get a cool dunk in transition. That really gets him going. And that's the type of guy you want leading your franchise. And it's a great choice by the Pacers to re-sign him. I don't think you had another choice.
Yeah, you had to. You got to pick a face. You got to have a guy who's that guy. You know, the other thing I like about Haliburton, and I have another question for you, but like the thing I like about Haliburton is he also just seems to be a basketball junkie. Not that it matters, but you look at some of these other stars, like, you know, the aforementioned Zion Williamson, who it's like, I'm not sure how much he likes basketball because he doesn't seem to be trying that hard to stay in shape. But like Haliburton, obviously he's the face of the franchise and he's the guy, but like he was at every single workout, as I mentioned earlier. Like you see him tweeting about Fever games and like Fever players, like he's watching that. And like, he's like, you know, on NBA League Pass, he's tweeting stuff on days off, that stuff he's watching. Like this is a dude who seems like he just loves basketball, loves to play. I'm curious to see, you know, what would you like to see him, you know, to be that high level elite player? And I've been saying this to a lot of other friends, like what Haliburton needs to do now is he's got to come back every year with something new. And in a weird spot, like, you know, you look at his shot and it's like his shot looks funky, but he's shooting like 39-40% from 3. He gets it off. So it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it at some point. You know, the Reggie Miller had a perfect shot up until he released it. Then it's like all elbow, you know, wrist clicks, and it's like a complete nightmare after that.
Yeah.
But he's one of the best. Anyway, what would you like to see Tyrese come back with this year? Or in a different way, some of the things you think he needs to add to his game to continue to move up to become like an all NBA level player?
So I'd say the biggest thing for me is on defense, is off-ball defense. I came to terms, you know, probably, like I said, a couple years ago when he was on the Kings, that he's probably not ever going to be a great on-ball defender. You mentioned that just odd body shape. I just don't think he's going to be able to slow many guys down from getting to the hoop. But as an off-ball guy, just being more alert, he does have the length to, you know, get into passing lanes and be more alert. That's something I'd like to see. And then he made a step this year, but just continuing to make steps as a driver, as a finisher. He's a great shooter, great passer. And if you can get more consistent at getting to the hoop and drawing contact when you get there, getting to the foul line more, I think that'll raise him from whatever he was, 20, 21 points a game to maybe 24 or 25.
Yeah, I would agree. And he's got to keep adding things to that game. I would agree with the defense. I think he's got to work on like some mid-range shots. He's just got to come back and continually get better. Here's the other question I was thinking about. We mentioned this in the last pod. The Pacers have a nice window that's there, but it's also going to close quickly with this extension they gave Haliburton, which again, like I'll say last time, they have to do, and it's the right thing to do. But this year he's on a club option of $5.5, basically $5.8 million. In 2024, he goes to $35 million. They have a great luxury this year of having your best player at $5 million a year. They have no bad contracts on their books. Next year, going into it, they only are at $125 million for the cap in 2024. Although there's a lot of like cap holes and a lot of weird stuff that's going on. The books need to be cleared up. It looks like the league is moving toward kind of this model where, you have Jaylen Brown, you have Jason Tatum, you have Jaylen Brown, like you have Giannis, you have Drew Holiday, like you have your guy, you have your second guy. It looks like it's going to be hard to build like Tyrese and a bunch of other pieces. Do you think who would you see the Pacers most likely to have to be that second guy? Or do you see the Pacers maybe trying to blaze a different path, going like Tyrese is our max, and we're going to try and have a bunch of like mid-level dudes and not go to max with a bunch of, low-level contracts?
I think they absolutely want that guy to be Benedict Mathurin. And to me, Benedict Mathurin's development really decides the fate and the future of this team. If he just develops a little bit, and this is going to be a team that I think is in the playoffs every year, but maybe tops out at the second round or first round. If he really becomes that second guy, an all-star-ish level player, then I think this is a team that could, obviously you need more than two players, but you have those two players as your base. And if you can build a decent squad around them, then that becomes a team that has a real championship level ceiling. So I think they want it to be Benedict Mathurin, and you kind of cross your fingers that he develops as well as you want him to, because if he does, then it does become very scary for the rest of the Eastern Conference in about 3 or 4 years.
I think you're right. I think that's the obvious option. I mean, maybe you could look at like, can Turner do that? But I mean, Turner's 27. It's kind of like, this is kind of where
he is what he is. And he's a really good player, but he is what he is for the most part.
Yeah. No, and you're right. And you saw a lot of it with Mathurin last year, or at least I did. Like, you look at him and it's like, as a rookie, it's like, this dude is a player. Like, he came in, he looked ready for the NBA. He didn't really have a drop off after 40 games. His stats stayed pretty steady throughout. He has a lot of things to work on his game. He's got to work on his shooting. He's got to work on kind of evening things out. But, the really great players take that leap in that first to second year, and he should be a starter this year. What I like is that he was basically the sixth man all year and didn't seem to, at least outwardly, didn't seem to complain too much about that. It's like, I get my role. I understand it. He, again, kind of, this team has an identity, which I really like, which is a lot of guys who seem to like to play basketball, to understand their role, not causing a lot of issues, and just like wanting to get better. Now, we'll see if it gets out there, if it translates to wins and play on the court. But I agree. And if Mathurin ends up becoming that guy, and it's weird, man, the NBA, you almost have to become a fan of like numbers and Excel sheets. But if he becomes that guy, in 2025, 26, so 3 seasons, next season, the season after, and then the season after that, he's still on a club option of $9.1 million. He would become a restricted free agent the year after. So his extension, if he becomes a max player, wouldn't be until the 26th season. So you kind of have 3 years where you could have your two best players with only one of them being on a max contract for 2 years. That gives you a lot of flexibility. That probably gives you about a $30 to $40 million cap option for 2 years, where you could go and get a third, aging star at that point to bring in here. So there's a lot of really good options. But to your point, Mathurin's got to take that leap, and he's got to take it kind of quick. Like, he can't take 4 years to figure it out, because they got to know basically in probably 12 months, is he the dude that we're going to give a max to in 12 more months?
Yeah. And the big thing with the Kevin Pritchard era, since he took over that summer that the team traded Paul George away, has been, keeping assets alive. I don't think a lot of people realize this, especially not nationally, but Tyrese Haliburton is basically an extension of the Paul George trade. Like, I don't think people understand that. Like, that has been the whole thing with Kevin Pritchard. Okay, you get Oladipo and Sabonis in here. That doesn't work out. You get Haliburton for Oladipo. You turn that into a pick, which turns into, I think that's Andrew Nembhard and Ben Shepherd now. Then you turn the Sabonis part of that into Tyrese Haliburton. So that has been the whole thing with Kevin Pritchard. He has not let anybody of large importance just walk away in free agency. And so he's trying to figure out a way to really build a contender, which he hasn't been able to do, even though he's kept the assets alive. They haven't won a playoff series since he's been the full-time president of operations, but that's been his whole thing. And he's trying to do that year after year. So he's definitely already thinking about this. He's probably had these same type of conversations we're talking about around Benedict Mathurin. Like, this is kind of the timeline we want to see what we have in him.
Yeah. Do you think, no, you're dead on. I brought that up in the last pod. Like, it's wild that, you know, so many other teams have all-stars and they end up trading them for, like, you know, a couple of picks and a couple pieces here and there. It's like Pritchard has done this 3 different times. Like you said, he turned George, an all-star, into two all-stars, with Sabonis and Oladipo, and then turned those 2 all-stars into Haliburton, who's an all-star. It's like, that's an all-star for 2 all-stars for an all-star. You kind of end up in the same spot, but how many other teams trade an all-star for a bunch of bag of beans and then just pieces that never end up becoming all-stars? So I think that's great. The last thing is we talk contracts. Like, do you know, our unrestricted free agents this year, you have Buddy Hield, you know, Obi Toppin. I think they're going to let Obi Toppin kind of play it out and see how he does. And Aaron Nesmith. Do you see them, you know, just your feel, like, do you think they're going to try and lock this team in, or do you see them like moving Hield and Nesmith, or, you know, do you think there's still going to be some movement with these free agents as the year goes on?
Yeah, I think they're going to hold on to Hield, and then at the deadline, they're going to survey where they're at. If they are the 7 seed, let's say, I think they probably keep Buddy Hield and say, let's try to make a push to get in the playoffs. But if they're the 9 or the 10, maybe around the trade deadline, then there will be teams calling. Buddy Hield has been a hot name for contenders for years, hasn't been on one yet, but there will be some of those contenders will be like, hey, we really like this guy that can shoot 42, 43%. And then you may ship them off for more of those second round picks, or maybe even maybe you can get a team to give you a late first round pick for Buddy Hield. And so that's the thing with Hield. And yeah, I would expect them to play it out with Nesmith and Obi Toppin. They're both going to be restricted free agents, like you said, coming out of that 2020 class. I'd expect them to play it out with those two and just see what they can get out of them this year. Neither are completely proven. I did like what Aaron Nesmith did, especially the back half of the year. I feel like he showed a lot of good stuff, but neither are guys that you have to really lock in or say, we need you on our team right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I still gotta, you know, keep Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard kind of separated in my mind. Like, they sound too similar, so they came at the exact same time. It's like they turn into like one player for me. Dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on. We'll get you out of here on this. You know, I think this is why Tony and I started this pod now, is we both love talking Pacers. I look at this. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It does feel like, you know, I'm not sure if we're going to win we're probably not going to win a title. Like, as a Pacers fan, I've kind of come to the realization, like, titles are probably not in our cards, but you can be happy with good seasons. You can be happy with deep playoff runs. And then you just hope, you know, maybe one of those years you get a Dallas, you know, Dirk situation where you can kind of have the right setup play through, and maybe you do get a chance at a title. But, you know, in the NBA, you need one of those 3 or 4 guys. Those guys don't seem to come here. All that said, it does feel like we're entering an era that could be really interesting and really fun for Pacers fans. Do you feel the same way? And then, you know, what would be your aspirations for this upcoming season?
I think the aspirations for this season should be playoffs for this team, or at least at the very least get back into the play-in, which is that 7 through 10 seed. But you look at the Eastern Conference, and I'm not sure anybody has gotten worse necessarily, but you look at those spots around the 7-8 spot and where they were last year. I mean, the Hawks and the Bulls and the Raptors. If you look at a team like the Pacers that already has a proven all-star and then is getting more young players that are getting better, you can say, okay, there's no reason they can't be in that area with those teams. And so I think the expectation this year should be, you know, play-in level. And I do think there should be a lot of excitement if you're a fan or if you're watching this team, because there is a lot of young talent. And to me, no matter how good they are, no matter how many games this team wins, it'll probably be one of the 5 or 6 most fun teams to watch in the NBA this year.
I agree. And that's the thing. If you haven't been out there, if you're not watching the Pacers, I doubt it if you're listening to this podcast, but Haliburton is just so much fun to watch. It's a fun team. And yeah, you look at the East, the Bucks and the Celtics are in a different league. The 76ers are too, but I mean, dude, who knows? Like, that's going to be an interesting year with Harden. What are they going to get for him? Is he going to submarine that team? I think the Cavaliers are really good. They look bad in the playoffs. I think they're really good. The Knicks, we'll see. I mean, I think they're better than the Pacers, but we'll see. But I mean, the Nets, they're above the Pacers in the standing.
I was thinking of who's going to fall. It's the Nets. Yeah, they're not. Yeah. They're not going to be what they were.
Yeah. They had Durant and Kyrie. I mean, the Hawks, they were a 500 team last year. Like, I don't know how good Trey's going to be. They lost John Collins. The Heat also were like, they went to the finals. They weren't a great regular season team. We'll see. Regular season Jimmy Butler doesn't play like playoffs Jimmy Butler. There's a possibility the Pacers are above the Heat. The Raptors, I don't know. The Bulls seem to be a mess. So yeah, I could see that. Like, if you look at the East, I could see, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I could see the Pacers jump the Bulls, the Raptors, the Heat, the Hawks, the Nets. I mean, they could be in the 6-5 range pretty easily.
Right. And you look at this year, the Wizards also had a 35-47 record, identical with the Pacers. They're going to take a step back now. Yeah. They're all the way, 20-win team probably now. So yeah, there's definitely room for them to jump up into that range where they can seriously be a play-in team and maybe jump into that top 6 and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Magic could maybe jump the Pacers, although I still like the Magic are kind of doing what the Magic do, which is like they have a lot of pieces that doesn't really fit. Like, that's the thing with the Pacers is I know that we're not good. Like, for a team that won 35 games last year, but I look at it like, I'm not sure where else they have needs. Like, their need is they just need guys to get better in the positions. But like, you obviously have your point guard, you have a shooting guard and Buddy Hield. You have, in the 3 and the 4, you have a couple of guys there, whether it's Walker, whether it's Mathurin, whether it's Bruce Brown. Like, there's 3 guys for 2 spots. And again, Walker hasn't played a game, but it's like, you've got to give him room to grow. He's your number 1 pick this year. And then you have Turner at the 5. And that's, a lot of pieces there. It's interesting. And then you have a good backup. I'm pausing because I had heard on one of the pods I listened to, do you turn Turner and TJ McConnell in for Aiden, which would be an interesting move, giving you a better center position. But that's the thing is your second team, you have a guy like TJ McConnell who can, you have Nembhard, you have Nesmith, and you have a lot of, I was saying this last year, like, you have a lot of guys on this team that are not top level talent, but there are guys who can be, 4th, 5th, 6th guys on a finals team in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a lot of quality role players on this Pacers squad right now.
Yeah. All right, Zion, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on. We'll be having you back throughout the season and getting ready for it and looking forward to getting some Pacers going. Like, I've not been this excited for an NBA season in quite some time. Like, I'm excited to see the rookies. It's cool. You get to see Chet and Wembanyama the same year. Like, Chet's finally coming back. Do you take any stock in Summer League or not?
I'm like 50-50 of it. This is kind of my rule with Summer League and like the NFL preseason. Like, I feel like 50% of the players that look good in Summer League are actually good in the NBA. Then the other 50% are like, what happened to him? So, it's not, I don't think it means much, but as someone who just watches a lot of basketball, I definitely always tune in and just want to see what it looks like with, all the big names and the rookies.
Yeah, it's fun to watch it. I'm kind of like you. Like, it's kind of, if guys are good, it's like, well, they're playing against bad talent. If guys are bad, it's like, oh, well, they're just not trying. Or it's like, just they can be good in the pros. Like, who knows? So
you get to play like 5 or 6 games. It's such a small sample.
Yep. But it's wild, man. It's like, after this, we'll get a bit of a break, but it does feel like the NBA is getting to that year-round sport. It just feels like we just had the finals, and it's like you go right into the draft, right into free agency, right into summer league, and then you get like a month off, and then it's like, shit, we're turning around, and it's like schedules are released, and we're ready to go in October. It's a whole different topic for how they should move the season around. But Zion, it's been awesome. We'll be having you back throughout the year. I want to thank you all for listening. And again, tell your friends. We're here, Pacers. We'll be here all season. Looking forward to talking about it with you. For Zion, this is Scott for the Right at Meridian podcast, signing off.